Welcome to A-Star Science. This is part of our GCSE Must Know Chemistry series. This particular video is about fuel cells. Fuel cells is a topic that only the separate science students need to know for GCSE chemistry. So other tiers, foundation and higher, do not need to know in detail about fuel cells. There are many types of fuel cells. For the GCSE, they only want you to know about hydrogen fuel cells. But if you're interested, you can go and research many of the new innovations that scientists are trying to use to create energy in clean ways. And one of them, of course, is what we're talking about today, which is fuel cells. You also have to know for your GCSE the difference in advantages and disadvantages between fuel cells compared to rechargeable cells, what we will call rechargeable batteries, as well as alkaline cells, which we will call normal batteries, which people tend to use in your remote controls and devices and things like that. So let's look at fuel cells. Now, the key to understand is that there's a catalyst involved in a fuel cell. Of course, transition metals are used as catalysts. So in this case, we're using platinum, and platinum is the preferred catalyst in many of these fuel cells. And what the platinum catalyst does, it causes the hydrogen gas, which is the fuel for a fuel cell, the hydrogen gas, it causes it to split. And by splitting, it releases electrons. We know that electrons are negative, and if we can get electrons to move, then we can create a voltage. And so we can take those electrons and they will travel around that circuit that we've created and move to the side of the oxygen. So the first thing we need to look at is understand how the electrons come from the hydrogen. So if we have hydrogen gas and that splits to form electrons, then we know that's an oxidation reaction because it's lost electrons. That means we must form hydrogen ions. And in this case, there are two hydrogen ions. Let's create a bit more space. There are going to be two hydrogen ions. Because there are two on the left, that means there are two electrons as well. So this is our oxidation reaction, okay? And because we know that the anode is where oxidation happens, okay? So the anode is our negative electrode, and this is where the electrons are coming from. This is what we call the anode in this case. The second half equation that we need to understand is what happens with the oxygen. Well, if the hydrogen gas is oxidized, then the oxygen gas is going to be reduced. Now, the key to understanding the benefit of a fuel cell is the only waste product is water, H2O. So that's the waste product that we're going to get from this particular fuel cell. Well, how do we do that? Well, if we have oxygen, we know that we need to combine hydrogen ions, and we're also going to take the electrons that we had from the above equation. We need to balance that out. So if we have two oxygens here, we need to put a 2 here, and that leaves now 4 hydrogens. So we need to put a 4 here. That means we're going to have 4 electrons. So let me make a bit of space. That means we're going to have 4 electrons that are needed for this equation. We can then adjust the top equation to match that, because at the top we only had 2 electrons. So let's just change that now to balance them both out. 2 hydrogens, that means 2 hydrogens on the side, 4 hydrogens on the right hand side, and that's going to give 4 electrons. You can notice that both equations now have 4 electrons. This is very important because we can now cancel both of those equations out. We can cancel, I'll use a different color, the electrons out, which are on either side, and we can cancel the hydrogens out as well. Notice what we're going to be left with in the net equation. 2H2 plus O2 yields 2H2O. And we can see that all of our species are balanced. 4 hydrogens, 2 oxygens, 4 hydrogens, and 2 oxygens. And this is the process that you need to understand for fuel cells for GCSE. Remember that oxidation occurs at the anode in this case because we are producing electrons, whereas for the oxygen, it's getting reduction, and this is going to occur at the cathode because the cathode is a positive electrode, the anode is the negative electrode. So this is really important for you to understand. We're now going to look at the advantages of fuel cells, which is also something you need to understand for your GCSE. So what are the advantages of hydrogen fuel cells? As we said, we need to understand how they are different than the other types of cells, like the alkaline fuel cells and the rechargeable fuel cells. So some of the advantages are that they're easy to maintain. This is an acceptable answer that you can put on your exam. The reason why is that they're quite small. They don't have many different parts to them, so they're quite easy to maintain. Another key advantage is that water is the only waste product. And this water can be used for other applications. So for example, they're looking at using fuel cells in spacecraft because the astronauts can then use that water to drink. Okay, so this is really, really important as an important advantage for fuel cells as well. Another advantage is that they can provide a sustainable fuel source. And this is because water can be used as a starting fuel. Okay, so water can be used as a starting fuel. Now, there are some disadvantages. Fuel cell technology is still in development. And so one of the disadvantages of the fuel cells is they can be very expensive. And of course, we know the reason why. It's because it utilizes these very expensive catalysts. Hydrogen and oxygen are not very expensive, but catalysts such as platinum are. The other disadvantage is it needs a source of hydrogen. Now, I said that it can provide a sustainable fuel, and that's by using light, for example, solar light, which then could be used to power an electrolysis setup by which you then can split water and provide hydrogen. But obviously, if you are on a spacecraft, you're not going to be able to always have limitless supplies of water. So the fact that it needs a source of hydrogen is another disadvantage. And finally, hydrogen is very flammable, can be quite explosive. So that is also a danger of having hydrogen as a fuel supply for fuel cells. And that can be one of the disadvantages as well. Please do like and subscribe, leave a comment and let me know of any videos you'd like me to do.